My mother didn't say anything. She placed the job application next to my plate. Then she sat down and waited. The paper touched the edge of my fork. That was intentional. If she had left it farther away, I could have ignored it without looking rude. If she had put it directly on my plate, the gesture would have been too obvious, too theatrical, too easy to reject. But this was measured. It sat exactly where it needed to sit to make the point without saying it aloud. I looked at it. Northline Logistics. Warehouse associate. Full-time. Night shift available. Benefits after 90 days. I didn't move it. "Eat," she said. I picked up my fork, took one bite, chewed slowly. She didn't touch her food. She watched me instead. "You saw it." "Yes." "You're not picking it up." "No." That was the first decision, not to argue, not to explain, not to perform gratitude or outrage, just to let the paper sit there. Silence changed shape almost immediately. It wasn't empty. It thickened. My mother had always hated pauses she didn't control. In our house, silence usually meant one of two things. Somebody had done something wrong, or somebody was about to. Tonight, the paper made silence into a third thing. A test. "You can't keep doing this," she said. "Doing what?" She tapped the paper once. "This." Not the application, not the job. My life. The kitchen smelled like garlic, pepper, and onions cooked too long in butter. The overhead light had a faint yellow cast to it because the fixture was old and the cover needed cleaning. The clock above the refrigerator ticked too loudly when the room went quiet. Outside the window, the neighbor's floodlight kept flickering every few seconds because the sensor had been broken for weeks, and no one wanted to admit whose side of the fence it was really on. Ordinary details. That was the worst part. Humiliation rarely arrives in beautiful settings. It happens under bad lighting with cooling food and someone who has known your face since childhood deciding they understand the future better than you do. "I work," I said. My mother looked at me the way people look at a door that has swollen in the frame and won't shut properly. "For who?" "Clients." "Which ones?" I didn't answer. That was mistake number one. Not because I didn't have names. I did. 2 active contracts. 1 recurring support agreement. 1 large near close that had dragged 3 weeks beyond the original verbal yes. But none of those names meant anything to her. They weren't places she could drive past. They didn't wear uniforms. They weren't in buildings with employee parking and fluorescent break rooms and laminated orientation packets. They lived in cloud systems, Slack channels, project boards, and invoices. Real money, real work, real deliverables, but invisible to anyone who needed labor to be witnessed in order to trust it. My silence gave her the upper hand. She leaned forward. "This is real," she said. She tapped the paper again. "Hours." Tap. Pay. Tap. Insurance. Then she stopped tapping and held my eyes for 1 extra second. Stability. There it was. Not concern, not disappointment, not even anger. Fear with vocabulary. That word carried her entire world inside it. Stability meant regularity. Stability meant a paycheck someone else was responsible for. Stability meant a supervisor, a schedule, a badge, a building. Stability meant the kind of life she could explain to relatives, to neighbors, to church people, to herself. In her language, my life had none of that. "You don't have that," she said. I looked at the application again. Warehouse associate, 40 hours. Forklift certification preferred. Must lift 50 pounds. Overnight differential available. It wasn't a bad job. That mattered. This story would have been easier if she had shoved some humiliating dead-end nonsense at me. But she hadn't. She had chosen something respectable enough to make my refusal look foolish. That was her intelligence. She never attacked from a weak moral position if she could avoid it. She attacked from the middle, where ordinary people like to stand and call themselves practical. "What happens if I don't take it?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "I stop helping." There are sentences that change the chemical balance of a room. That was one of them. Not because it was loud, because it was administrative. Help in my mother's system was not emotional support. It was infrastructure. Letting me stay in the house at reduced rent while I built the consulting side up. Covering groceries when contracts paid late. Letting my share of utilities blur around the edges if a month got tight. Small leniencies, quiet parental cushioning. The kind of support families call temporary for so long that it starts to feel like architecture. How soon? I asked. This month. Beginning when? Now. She cut into her food then, finally, took a bite, chewed, swallowed, as if having said the hard thing meant she had earned the right to eat. That was the second decision point. I could argue, I could plead, I could lie and say the bigger contract was closing tomorrow. I could promise numbers I didn't yet have. Instead, I nodded once. That was mistake number 2. She read it as surrender. You understand, she said. No, I said. I understand the pressure. Her face changed immediately. You don't understand anything. Now I had a role. The stubborn son, the unrealistic one, the one who needed reality explained to him in smaller words. People think family narratives are built over years. Sometimes they lock in inside one dinner, one wrong answer, one pause too long, one sentence delivered in the wrong tone. Friday, she said. I looked up. What? Interview. I stared at her. You scheduled it? Yes. When? This afternoon. That hit harder than the application had. The paper was a symbol. This was movement. Action had already been taken. She had not merely prepared an option. She had coordinated a path. At what time? 9. I checked the clock. Tuesday night. That gave me 3 full days and 1 morning. Not enough. For someone with a stable job, maybe this would have been a nuisance. For me, it became a clock. My largest potential contract, the one that would stabilize everything, was still waiting on final internal approval from a client who moved like a glacier with the legal department. I had been told 48 hours 3 times already. My smaller clients covered basics, but not independence. Not if my mother withdrew the buffer. Not if I started paying market-level rent and utilities. Not if one invoice slipped. You shouldn't have done that, I said. She set down her fork. You weren't going to. That was the first completely honest thing she had said all night. Because she was right. I was not going to apply. Not because I was above the work, because I knew exactly what it would do. Night shifts would break the consulting schedule. Exhaustion would wreck the quality. Quality would lose clients. Losing clients would prove her right. One temporary job would become the emotional logic for abandoning the thing I had actually built. I don't need that job, I said. The moment it left my mouth, I knew it was wrong. Not factually wrong, strategically wrong. Her posture changed. Tiny, but enough. I knew it. Now I wasn't a man making a difficult decision. I was a man dismissing reality. I had handed her the framing. You think you're above this? No. Then why won't you take it? Because it isn't mine. Because it will eat the thing I'm trying to build. Because I am closer than you think and farther than I can prove. Because invisible work still counts, even when you can't post it on the refrigerator like a school certificate. None of those sentences would have landed. Not then. Not in that room. So I said nothing. Silence again. Bad move. Bad move twice. Every second I didn't fill it, she filled it for me. She leaned back slightly. That's the problem, she said. You've built your whole life around almost. I looked at her. She kept going. Almost stable. Almost successful. Almost enough. Almost there. There are times when the person attacking you accidentally says something true in the wrong direction. That was one of them. My life had been built around almost, but not because I was delusional. Because that is what growth looks like before it hardens into certainty. Almost is the middle. Every person who has ever built anything real has spent years inside almost while onlookers called it immaturity. But explanation without proof is just better worded begging. So I picked up my glass, drank water, bought time. I'm working, I said. To what outcome? There it was again. Outcome. This is where generations split. My mother's generation trusts visible result. Not process, not trajectory, not leverage. Result. If it can't be pointed at, touched, explained in one sentence, it doesn't yet belong to adulthood. I could have lied then. Said the contract was signed. Said the numbers were guaranteed. Said I had more runway than I did. But lies told under pressure become debt. And debt is all I was trying not to build, financially or morally. So I said, soon. She actually laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly. Worse, tired. You've been saying soon for a year. No, I had been saying different things. She had just heard one thing. That's the cruelty of being misunderstood by someone who believes they are being practical. Complexity gets compressed into whatever confirms their fear. After dinner, the application stayed where it was. I left it there on purpose. That was my third decision. Not take it to my room, not tear it up, not throw it away, leave it in the open. Let it remain a live object in the house. Let the tension circulate. The next morning, it was still on the table. But now there was a pen beside it, and a yellow sticky note in my mother's handwriting. Sign it, no greeting, no smiley face, no let's talk. Instruction. That was escalation. The paper had gone from suggestion to command overnight. I stood at the kitchen counter holding coffee I didn't actually want and read the note twice. Then my mother came in, saw me looking at it, and said, "You're still thinking?" "Yes. You've had months." "I've had work." "For what outcome?" Same question. Sharper now, not exploratory. Punitive. I picked up the pen. She watched my hand. I rolled it once between my fingers. Set it down again, not on the application, beside it. That small act changed the room. Because now I had physically acknowledged the mechanism and still refused the instruction. "You're being stubborn," she said. "I'm thinking." "No, you're hiding." "From what?" "From adulthood." That one almost made me laugh. Almost. Because if there is anything more absurd than working 70-hour weeks on a fragile path with no safety net and being told you're hiding from adulthood, I have not encountered it. Still, I didn't take the bait. Not fully. "What if I take the interview and say no?" I asked. She narrowed her eyes. "Why would you do that?" "To hear them out." "No." Now she moved too quickly. That was useful. "If you go," she said, "you go to take it seriously." Ah, there it was. This wasn't about optionality. It was about submission. About putting myself physically inside a process she had chosen, so the mere act of attendance could later be used as a moral claim. See? You knew I was right. You went. You considered it. You were ready to be saved. No, not that. I looked at the paper again, not the logo, the line spacing, the boxes, the signature field at the bottom. The flat administrative certainty of forms. Fill here, initial here, print clearly, consent by ink, become manageable. I sat down, pulled the paper toward me, and began filling it out. My mother stayed still, too still. I could feel her trying not to react too early. Name, address, phone, work history, emergency contact. I filled every line carefully, deliberately, neatly. Then I reached the signature line, stopped, set the pen down, folded the paper once, then unfolded it again and left it exactly where it was. Unsigned. That was the fourth decision, far more dangerous than refusing outright. Because now the application had changed. It was no longer hypothetical. It looked close enough to completion that my mother could start building behavior around it. She saw the empty signature line and said, "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means I read it. It means nothing. It means I'm not signing something I don't believe in." She took a full breath in through her nose, slow, controlled, then she nodded once. "All right." That word again, always worse than anger. "I'll call and cancel." Relief came too early. I knew that immediately. Then she added, "And you'll start paying full rent." There it was. Consequence escalated. Not just help stops. Now the new system had numbers. How much? She named an amount higher than I had expected, but still just plausible enough that arguing would make me sound childish. "And utilities," pause. "And groceries," pause. "And internet." She had thought this through. Not in rage, in planning. That was important. She wasn't punishing me. She was removing the cushion and forcing my life to declare itself in numbers. In her mind, this was fairness. In mine, it was exposure. I nodded. This time, I meant it. That was the fifth decision. Accept the cost. Not because I was confident, because I no longer had the moral right to defend my path if I refused to pay its actual price. That night, I opened my banking app 4 times, then my spreadsheet twice, then the invoicing platform. I knew the numbers already. That's what fear does. It makes you recheck what has not changed, as if repetition could create margin. Without the pending contract, I could survive maybe 6 weeks paying what she wanted while keeping the business intact. 8 if I cut hard. Less if any current client delayed. For the first time since moving back home, I felt genuinely exposed, not embarrassed, mathematically vulnerable. That is a cleaner fear, harder, useful. I called the client the next morning. "I need confirmation," I said. "You're early." "I'm out of time." Pause. "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." 48 hours. "I don't have 48 hours. Another pause. Then the sentence I hated because it came from outside the house, from the world I kept insisting would validate me. "Then take something stable." Same word, different mouth, same pressure. That was the moment I understood the full shape of the conflict. This wasn't me versus my mother. It was me versus timing. The world rewards proof, not trajectory. My mother had simply personalized the same brutality. I pushed harder, too hard. "Maya, I need a decision." "You're not hearing me." "No, you're not hearing me." Silence. Then, "You're creating pressure that makes this harder, not easier." Mistake number 3. I had turned urgency into noise. The call ended cold. I sat at my desk, stared at the spreadsheet on screen, and felt the first crack of real panic. Not because the deal was dead, because I had finally done what fear always tempts competent people to do: trade discipline for acceleration. That evening, the application was gone from the table. For one irrational second, I thought maybe the whole thing had softened. Then I found it in my room, on my desk, centered on the keyboard. That was new. That was violation. Not because paper had moved, because she had crossed into the one space in the house I had been pretending still belonged fully to me. The yellow note was gone. In its place, a white envelope with my name on it. Inside was a photocopy of the interview confirmation. Friday, 9 a.m. She hadn't canceled anything. She had escalated. And suddenly I understood the deeper game. This was no longer about offering me a path. It was about proving that she could still move my life into channels I refused to choose for myself. That changed my anger. It stopped being defensive, became structural. If I let this happen, even passively, then the story of my adulthood would always contain this sentence. My mother submitted the application that finally got me on track. No. That was not going to become history. I held the paper in my hand longer than I needed to. The texture had changed. Not physically, but in meaning. Last night, it was something placed next to me. This morning, it was something moved into my space. That difference mattered. I walked out of my room. The hallway felt narrower than usual. Same walls, same pictures, same small crack near the baseboard that had been there for years. But something about the house had shifted. Not louder, not colder, just less neutral. My mother was already in the kitchen, same chair, same position. She looked up before I said anything. "You went into my room," I said. "Yes." No hesitation. She didn't even try to soften it. "That wasn't your decision to make. It became mine when you refused to make one." She said it calmly. That made it harder to fight, because calm statements feel like facts, even when they aren't. I held up the paper slightly. "You sent this?" "Yes." "Under my name?" "Yes." No pause, no defense, no explanation, just confirmation. That was the moment the situation changed shape. Before, this was pressure. Now it was control. I pulled out a chair but didn't sit. "I didn't agree to this." "You didn't disagree either," she said. That was precise and wrong, but structured enough to sound right. I left it unsigned. You left it unfinished. Same action, different interpretation. She had already decided which version counted. I sat down slowly. The chair made a small sound against the tile, louder than it should have. My father walked in halfway through that silence. He stopped when he saw both of us, the paper, my posture, her stillness. "What's going on?" he asked. "She's not taking the job," my mother said. No build-up, no context, just the conclusion. He looked at me, not angry, not confused, just already leaning in her direction. "You should go," he said. There it was. Second voice, same outcome. "It's one interview," he added. "That's how it starts," I said. He frowned slightly. "That's how responsibility starts." Same word, different definition. Responsibility to him meant showing up somewhere physical, being accountable to something outside yourself. A schedule you didn't control, a system you didn't design. To me, responsibility meant the opposite. Building something that only worked if I showed up correctly every day without anyone watching. Neither of us was wrong, but only one of those definitions was easy to explain. And easy always wins in a room like that. "You're making this bigger than it is," he said. "No," I said. "You're making it smaller than it is." That landed, for a second, then disappeared. Because without proof, even a good sentence dies quickly. My mother leaned back slightly. "You have rent now," she said. We agreed. Her tone didn't change. "You don't have income you can show." "I will." "When?" There it was again. That question didn't ask for belief, it asked for timing. And timing was exactly what I didn't have. Everything I had was real. But it wasn't ready, and not ready looks identical to not real from the outside. "If I go to this interview," I said slowly, "you're deciding my path for me." "If you don't go," she replied, "you're refusing to have one." That line hit harder than anything else she had said. Because it wasn't about the job anymore. It was about legitimacy. If I didn't take a path she recognized, then my path didn't count. The room went quiet again. Not empty, tight. My father crossed his arms. "You're not in a position to be this selective," he said. That was new. Not advice, not suggestion, assessment, a downgrade in status. I felt that one. Not emotionally, structurally. Because if they both believed that, then every future decision I made would be filtered through that assumption. He's not in a position. He doesn't understand risk. He needs guidance. That's how control becomes permanent. I looked down at the paper again, the signature at the bottom. It wasn't mine, but it looked close enough that someone who didn't know me well wouldn't question it. That bothered me more than anything else. Not because it was illegal, because it was convincing. She hadn't forced a fake. She had created something believable. "I'm not going," I said. This time, I didn't leave space. My mother didn't react immediately. She just looked at me, then nodded once, slow, controlled. "Then you can't stay here like this." That was new. That was escalation. Not just money, not just pressure. Now it was presence. "You're serious?" I asked. "Yes." Still calm, still steady. That made it worse. Because it wasn't anger. It was a decision already made. I leaned back slightly, felt the edge of the chair against my spine, measured the room. 2 people. Same side. Same logic. Same outcome. And for the first time since the paper touched my fork, I felt the situation move out of discussion and into consequence. I went back to my room with the paper still in my hand. That was important. I did not leave it on the table this time. I brought it with me, not because I had changed my mind, because conflict gets clearer when you stop pretending the object isn't part of your life. My room looked exactly the same as it had the night before. Desk by the window. Second monitor on the left. Notebook open beside the keyboard. 3 sticky notes stuck along the lamp base with numbers I no longer needed but hadn't thrown away yet because they represented progress. And when progress is invisible to everybody else, you get protective of the scraps that prove it existed. The application looked wrong on that desk. Too official, too blunt. A sheet of fixed time entering a room built around self-directed hours. I sat down and opened my laptop. My inbox was unchanged. No confirmation from Maya, no signed scope update, no invoice approval. Just 2 client emails about revisions, 1 calendar reminder, and a notification from my bank that felt needlessly cheerful for the amount of money currently in it. I opened the spreadsheet anyway. Income, projected, outstanding, delayed, fixed expenses, new rent number, utilities, food, transportation, software renewals, tax reserve. That last line sat there like a moral instruction I was too tired to appreciate. I ran the numbers once, then again, then a third time with stricter assumptions. The result didn't change enough to comfort me. If the contract closed this week, I could hold. Not relax, hold. If it slipped another month, the floor changed completely. That was the first real collapse. Not dramatic, not the kind anyone sees in movies. No broken glass, no yelling, just a spreadsheet refusing to become kinder because I needed it to. My phone buzzed. I grabbed it too fast. Not Maya. Not the contract. Northline Logistics. Unknown extension. I stared at the screen until it stopped. Then it rang again. I answered. This is Rowan. Hi, Rowan. This is Alicia from Northline. Just confirming you're still set for tomorrow at 9. The room went very still. I looked down at the application on my desk. Unsigned. Incomplete, and yet somehow now alive in the world without me. I didn't submit that, I said. Pause. Then the polite confusion of somebody in HR discovering they have stepped into family weather without wanting to. We received a completed interest form yesterday. Completed by who? Another pause. Then the corporate dodge. Your contact. Of course, not name, not blame. Just a neutral word that lets institutions stay dry while people drown around them. I'm not confirming anything yet, I said. All right, she replied, cautious now. But the slot is reserved until 8:30 tomorrow. 8:30. Now the clock had a smaller clock inside it. That's very helpful, I said, and ended the call before my voice could turn into something she didn't deserve. I sat there with the phone in my hand and understood something I hadn't wanted to name. My mother had not only pressured me, she had moved me into a system, into a calendar, into somebody else's expectation. That is the real violence of family overreach. It doesn't always look emotional. Sometimes it looks administrative. Someone else making commitments in your name because they have confused love with authority for so long they no longer hear the difference. I called Maya, straight to voicemail. I didn't leave one. I texted instead. Need yes, no by morning. I cannot hold the window open longer. I looked at the sentence after I sent it and hated it immediately. Too hard, too brittle, not wrong exactly. But brittle people break first in negotiations. I stood up and paced once across the room. Twice. The floorboard near the closet clicked the same way it always had. Small sound. Old house. Everything familiar, which somehow made the danger feel less fair. Because this was not happening in some abstract crisis. It was happening where I kept my socks and extension cords and backup hard drives. Ordinary space. Ordinary pressure. That's how lives get redirected. Not at cliff edges, at desks, at kitchen tables, through paperwork. At 9:14, my mother knocked once and opened the door before I answered. She looked at the application on my desk, then at me. You brought it with you. Yes. Good. No, I thought, not good, just present. I'm not going, I said. She crossed her arms. You still have time to stop making this harder. There shouldn't be anything to stop. You shouldn't have sent it. She didn't react to the accusation. That bothered me more than denial would have. Instead, she looked around the room. The monitor, the notes, the open spreadsheet, the unpaid ambition of it all. You've built a whole atmosphere around uncertainty, she said. I almost laughed. Atmosphere. As if my work were scented air and lamplight instead of actual systems people paid for. I've built work, I said. You've built the feeling of work. That landed, because she had found the sharpest possible version of her argument. To her, the room did not look like effort. It looked like simulation. All the visible cues of productivity without the one cue she trusted most. External validation she could recognize. I'm close. You've been close. That doesn't mean I'm wrong. It doesn't mean you're right. We looked at each other across the room. No movement, no theatrics. Just two people trying to define the same life from opposite directions. Then she said the sentence that finally made me understand how far she had already gone in her own mind. If this fails, I will know I let you waste another year because I wanted to be kind. Kind, that word changed everything. Because now she had positioned my autonomy not as something I deserved, but as something she had indulged too long. In her story, she wasn't controlling me. She was finally stopping her own softness from becoming negligence. That meant she would escalate farther than before because now the conflict was moral for her. People are at their most dangerous when they believe interference is virtue. I don't need kindness, I said. No, she replied. You need structure. Then she left. No slammed door, no speech, just the certainty that tomorrow had become not one decision, but three. Interview or no interview. Contract or no contract. Home or no home. I slept badly, not for lack of exhaustion, because my mind kept doing what minds do under pressure, revising the same scenes into cleaner outcomes that reality had not offered. At 2:11 a.m., I woke up and checked my phone. Nothing. At 3:06 again. Nothing. At 4:32, a bank notification I didn't need and a weather alert for heat. By 5:20, I gave up on sleep and made coffee in the dark. The kitchen smelled different before sunrise, less domestic, more honest. Old wood, stale detergent from the mudroom, the faint grease ghost of dinners gone by. I sat at the table where the application had first appeared and watched steam rise from the mug until the house began making waking sounds around me. Pipes. A step upstairs. The old vent over the hallway hissing to life. Then my father's cough. He came down in work clothes even though he was 2 years into retirement because that was his version of discipline. Khakis, belt, collared shirt. He saw me at the table and stopped for half a beat. Couldn't sleep? No. He poured coffee. Didn't ask if I wanted more. Sat across from me. Not in my mother's chair. Adjacent. That mattered. He was not joining her exactly. He was entering as himself. You're making this harder than it has to be, he said. I looked at him over the rim of the mug. That seems to be a popular sentence in this house. He ignored that. She's scared. I know. No, he said, quieter now. You know she's angry. You don't know she's scared. That interested me despite myself. He added sugar to his coffee, though his doctor had told him twice not to. She thinks one day she's going to wake up and you'll still be here, older, more tired, with less margin, and she'll know she helped you stay in a life that never became solid. That was the closest anyone had come to something like truth. Not because it excused her, because it named the fear underneath the control. I'm not asking her to believe in a fantasy, I said. He looked at me for a long second, then asked, Can you prove that before 9? There it was. The whole matter compressed into one brutal question. Can you prove it in time? Not someday. Not generally. Not in theory, before 9. I had no answer. He nodded once, not unkindly. That's the problem. No, I thought. That's the deadline. Different thing. But deadlines often win because they sound like morality when people are frightened enough. He finished his coffee and stood up. At the doorway, he paused. If you go to the interview, he said, it doesn't mean your other work dies. That was his compromise, his hope, his inability to understand that certain detours become identity because of what they demand from your energy, not because of what they say on paper. It does for me, I said. He didn't argue, but he didn't agree either. That was my father's specialty. He could leave a room having contributed pressure without ever making himself fully responsible for its shape. By 7:30, my phone was still silent. By 7:50, I was dressed, but not for the interview. Jeans, dark shirt, not warehouse appropriate, not client formal. The kind of clothes you wear when you haven't yet admitted what kind of morning it is. At 8:13, Maya finally texted. Can talk in 10. Not yes, not no, not enough. I stared at the screen until the words blurred slightly. 10 minutes was too long and not long enough. The interview slot would release at 8:30. The call would come around 8:23 if she meant exactly what she wrote, which meant I would have roughly 7 minutes to either breathe or collapse. My mother came into the kitchen carrying the application folder. Not the loose pages, a folder now. She had upgraded the symbolism. She set it down in front of me. Leave by 8:30, she said. No anger, no plea. A deadline spoken like weather. I looked at the folder, then at her, then at the clock over the stove. 8:15. This is what time pressure really does. It doesn't just force decisions. It strips dignity from the order in which you would have preferred to make them. I stood up, not toward the door, toward the counter. My mother watched me. Where are you going? To wait for the call. Her expression changed. You're still doing this. I'm still working. It's 8:15. Yes. There is a real job waiting for you in 15 minutes. And there is real work waiting for me in 10. She shook her head once, as if I had said something almost intelligent but fundamentally unserious. That look nearly broke me more than the application had, because contempt from strangers sharpens you. Contempt from parents distorts your own outline. I leaned on the counter and watched the phone. The house felt overlit. The refrigerator hummed too loudly. My mother folded and unfolded the edge of the folder as though if she could keep her hands moving, the situation might still collapse into the version she wanted. At 8:21, the phone rang. Maya. I answered on the first vibration. This is Rowan. Too formal, too tight. She heard it. Take a breath, she said. I did not. Do we have it? Silence. Paper moving on her end. Then, we have approval. The room changed, not visually, internally. Every object returned to its real size. The folder on the table became paper again. The clock became a clock. My mother became a woman standing in a kitchen, frightened and wrong, not an institution with the right to define me. I closed my eyes for 1 second. Not relief exactly. Release of compression. What are the conditions? I asked. She told me. Not perfect, not magical, but enough. Enough up front to cover the new rent. Enough recurring to hold if I got through the next 6 weeks clean. Enough legitimacy to stop speaking in future tense every time someone challenged the shape of my life. I asked 2 more questions. Took notes on the back of an unopened electric bill envelope because it was the nearest paper. Then I said, send everything now. It's already on its way. I thanked her. And that was when my mother, still watching from 6 feet away, said, what did she say? No softness, no curiosity, just demand sharpened by fear. I looked at her, then at the folder, then at the clock. 8:26. The interview was still possible. That mattered, because now my choice would be fully mine. No martyrdom, no excuse, no forced scarcity narrative later. I could still go. I could take the interview just in case. I could preserve optionality. Please both worlds enough to remain morally legible inside this house. That is how most people surrender the shape of their life. Not under collapse. Under the temptation to remain understandable. My phone buzzed with the contract email. I opened it, scrolled once, saw the signature line. Real. Executed. Live. I placed the phone down on the table, opened the folder my mother had prepared, took out the application, and for the first time looked directly at the forged signature. It wasn't a terrible imitation. That was almost the cruelest part. Not skilled enough to pass real scrutiny, close enough to show what she believed she had the right to do. I picked up the page with both hands. My mother took 1 step forward. Rowan. I tore it down the middle. Once. The sound was smaller than I expected. Paper doesn't protest much when it stops pretending to be authority. Then I tore the halves again, and again. Slowly. Not for drama, for completion. My mother stared. Not at me, at the paper, at the decision becoming irreversible. "You are making a mistake," she said. "No," I said. "You made one for me." That was the cleanest sentence I had spoken in months. My father appeared in the doorway behind her, drawn by the sound or the silence after it. He looked from the scraps on the table to the phone to my face, and for the first time since this began, he did not speak immediately. That mattered, because silence from him now meant recalculation, not agreement. "I have the contract," I said. My mother didn't move. "What contract?" I slid the phone toward her. She didn't take it. My father did. He read the first lines. His eyes moved once, then again, slower. He handed it back to me. "Is it signed?" "Yes." "Is it real?" "Yes." That should have ended it. It didn't. Because family conflicts are never only about facts. They are about what facts cost people emotionally once those facts reorder the hierarchy they had already built around you. My mother looked at the torn application and said, almost quietly now, "You still should have gone." That surprised me, not because it was irrational, because it was honest. To her, the issue was no longer whether my work existed. It was that I had refused her path so completely that even being wrong had not given her the comfort of being obeyed. I understood then that this story would not end in one scene. The paper tearing was not resolution. It was only the point of no return. The first month after that did not feel victorious. That matters. People like clean endings because they rescue them from the inconvenience of process. But process is what your life actually becomes once the dramatic sentence has already been spoken. I paid rent on the 1st. All of it. Transferred before breakfast. No note, no flourish. The amount sat in my bank history looking less like independence than anesthesia. I cut everything. Streaming services gone. Takeout gone. Jim paused. Software subscriptions trimmed to what I actually used. I sold the second monitor and worked off one screen for 3 weeks. The desk felt smaller without it. My neck hurt more. My pace slowed. None of that showed up anywhere but my body, which is where most real consequences live. My mother did not comment on the transfer. That was its own form of commentary. She cooked less for me without saying she was doing it. Ingredients I normally used stopped appearing in the fridge. Good coffee became theirs again. Not cruelty. Boundary theater. Small domestic ways of reminding me that I had chosen adulthood and would now have the privilege of performing it under supervision. My father became easier. That was unexpected. Not warm. Easier. He asked one evening while tightening the loose screw on the back gate because he trusted hardware over dialogue. "How long is the contract?" 6 months. "Renewable?" "Yes." He nodded, then without looking at me said, "Good." That one word did not fix anything, but it moved a wall. My mother did not move. Not yet. By the second month, I lost one of the smaller clients. Budget cuts. Nothing personal. Those are the words people use when the result still empties the same part of your account. For 2 hours that afternoon, I sat in my car in a pharmacy parking lot staring at the dashboard and thinking about the application. Not the job, the paper, the simplicity of it, the clean line between effort and pay, the way somebody else's system can feel like mercy when your own is built from uncertainty. That was the closest I came to regretting the tear. Not because I wanted the warehouse, because certainty has a smell when you're tired enough. Cold air, concrete, shift start, badge, time clock. It seduces exhausted people by offering a life small enough to survive inside. I went home, opened the laptop, worked anyway. Because there is a point after every hard decision where your feelings become irrelevant and the structure either holds or it doesn't. Mine held. Barely. Then more. Then better. By the 3rd month, the main client extended. Not forever, not heroically, but enough. And once enough arrives twice, your nervous system starts believing it might not be an accident. That was when my mother finally asked the real question. Not at dinner, not during an argument. On a Tuesday night while rinsing plates. "How stable is it?" No accusation, no performance, just a question. That was the shift. Not approval, recognition, slow, reluctant, real. I dried the plate in my hand and answered her honestly. Stable enough that I'm not choosing between the work and fear anymore. She nodded once. Didn't apologize, didn't say she understood, didn't mention the forged signature. But she did not ask again about Northline. And the next morning, the last photocopy of the application disappeared from the junk drawer by the phone. That was her apology. Small, insufficient, but real. Some families do not know how to repair beautifully. They only know how to stop repeating the injury. You learn to value that differently as you get older. The contract renewed. Then another one came through from a referral. Then another smaller consulting thread turned into recurring support. Nothing exploded upward. There was no cinematic montage of success. Just receipts, transfers, less panic, more sleep. That is what building looks like after the argument. Quiet proof. One paid bill after another. 1 month where your body stops bracing before it checks the account. One day where you realize the person who doubted you now watches your work hours the way they once watched your avoidance. My mother never said, "You were right." I never said, "You forged my signature." Some truths stay alive even after they stop being useful to repeat. But one evening, months later, I came home and found a folded flyer on the kitchen counter. Not an application. A local networking event for independent contractors and digital small businesses. No note. No speech. Just the flyer. I stood there for a long second holding my keys. Then I looked toward the living room. She was there, pretending to watch television. I almost said thank you. Didn't, because some gestures shrink if you name them too soon. Instead, I took the flyer, folded it once, and put it in my bag. That was enough. Maybe more than enough. Because the story had never really been about the warehouse. It had been about authorship. Who gets to define what counts as work before the proof is visible? Who gets to move your life into channels you do not choose? Who gets to claim they were saving you when what they were really saving was their own ability to explain you to the world? In the end, the job application did what it was meant to do, just not in the way my mother intended. She set it beside my plate as a test. I left it there long enough to see what kind of future she was trying to hand me. Then I paid to refuse it. That cost more than I wanted for a while, maybe more than was wise. But the older I get, the more I understand this. The expensive choice is not always the wrong one. Sometimes the expensive choice is just the only one that lets you remain visible to yourself when the room around you wants a simpler version. The paper was cold. The food was hot. The room was tense. All of that mattered, but not as much as the moment after. The moment I stopped asking whether she understood my life and started asking whether I was willing to let her define it because understanding would have been easier. I wasn't. That was the real decision. Everything after that was just the bill. My mother set a job next to my plate. I left it there long enough to understand the price, then chose to pay a different one.